Hi, I'm Bill Laveris. I'm the Content Director for the Enterprise CIO Forum. I'm very happy today to be joined here by Donald Livingood, who is Distinguished Technologist at HP and one of the foremost experts there, anywhere for that matter, on the subject of big data. Donald, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thanks, Bill. No problem. Glad to be here.
You know, earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal, my favorite newspaper, ran a very large special section on big data with the headline, "Big Data is Changing the Whole Equation for Business." It's a pretty powerful statement for a pretty powerful publication. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think the really cool thing now is that businesses have access to a lot more information than they've ever had access to, which allows them to take that into account when they're making their business plans or making decisions. And you see that a lot, especially in banks, where they're able to take advantage of having information on their customers, both through things like mortgages and loans and credit cards and checking accounts and savings accounts, and they can see people's patterns and make decisions on those patterns to offer them better services and that sort of thing. Even if you think of some of these banks with their investments, right, they can look at patterns in the stock market and make investment decisions based on those patterns, and the patterns are only discoverable through massive amounts of data. And so you'll see it in lots of industries, and so banking is one. Another one is healthcare, right? Where I saw a thing recently which was really cool, where a lady has heart arrhythmia, right? And so she has a funky beating heart, and what the doctors are doing now is monitoring her usage of her cell phone. This is bizarre, but they're monitoring the usage of her cell phone, and from that data they can tell pattern changes in her behavior, and if there's some association of that with her arrhythmia problems, and potentially give her some ideas of how to avoid those. For HP, it's a little bit more mundane, maybe, in some ways. I mean, what we've done is we're tying together information like product registration for things like printers and that sort of thing. We'll take that product registration information, we'll combine that together with the calls that we have to the 1-800-HP Give Me Help kind of number. So we'll combine that together with some of the log files that are being generated off of these devices, and then what we're seeing is patterns there that allow us to modify the product and therefore give higher customer satisfaction, which is the goal when you're a vendor.
And of course, a lot of that data, for example, in the healthcare field, is going to be unstructured data, which presents its own set of challenges. If there is one thing, Donald, that you think organizations should be doing today, two if you want to go to two, what would that one thing be as it prepares for big data?
Since you're going to give me the out of having two things, I'm going to take advantage of that. So the two things that I think businesses really need to do is have two strategies, right? So big data I sort of divide it into two bits. I call one of them the sexy bit, right? So the sexy side of big data is all the analytics and the cool things that you can do with analytics, like I was talking about with the lady with the heart problem, or what banks or HP can do. The not so sexy side of big data is there's a ton of potential with big data, but there's the reality of how am I going to manage it. So you have to have a strategy for that as well. So those are the two pieces. Is you have to have a strategy around your business use case, what you're trying to get out of the data, how you're going to cost justify the investment that you're going to make, because you have to make an investment to do this. And then the reality is the IT strategy, which is how am I going to handle all of this data? Where am I going to store it? How am I going to get it? How fast is it going to change? How do I apply security and governance and operations and management and monitoring to it? So two different strategies. Those two strategies, of course, need to be married, but I think those are the two things, is you have a business sort of focused strategy as well as an IT strategy.
Okay, excellent, good. Yeah, it's a lot of new ground, obviously, particularly when you throw in things like predictive analytics, and again, the amount of unstructured and semi-structured data, it's a big challenge. That being the case, let's look at the flip side of that. What do you think are some of the more common mistakes or blunders that organizations may make as they start to try to get their hands around big data?
Yeah, it sort of varies. I mean, some of the I mentioned banks. The banks have, they have deep spending pockets, and they have a lot of expertise on staff directly, and they've been doing this for a long time. So, some of the large companies have a lot of expertise, and they've sort of, managed to live through some of the issues that a smaller company might have. But one of the things that they found along the way, most of them have found, is is this whole idea of growing from a proof of concept to a production system is really complicated, because you're looking at the interesting thing about big data is you can spin up a couple virtual machines and load it with some test data and have some aha moments about what you can do. But once you start spreading that out over hundreds, tens for a small company, let's just say 40 servers, or as you grow larger in terms of the amount of data, you had hundreds of servers or thousands of servers, just the scale out of that becomes problematic, and a lot of folks haven't thought through what does this mean from the standpoint of scale. What does it mean in terms of things like multi-tenancy? This data that I'm gathering is useful probably to a lot of different business units inside the organization. So how do I carve out multi-tenancy? How do I make sure, again, things like security and governance are covered as part of these new ways of operating with this massive amounts of data? And then I think one of the other things that folks have to realize is that some of the standard enterprise software that we've had in the past, and I'll just take something simple like Microsoft Exchange, right? So people have Exchange or Lotus Notes or SharePoint or file systems out there, and they can just go off, basically any software vendor almost that specializes in backup, and there's a backup utility that understands Exchange or understands SharePoint or understands file systems. That's not necessarily true with some of these big data systems. So having to think through the operations and management and monitoring, as I was mentioning before, and just simple things. Am I going to do a backup, or am I just really worried about data recovery in the event of a disaster? That sort of mindset needs to take place with big data, because it's completely different. And since some of this stuff came out of the open source community, an example there would be Hadoop, there may not be backup tools that recognize it. So, how am I going to do disaster recovery around this? The Google worries about different things than somebody like a bank. So, you need to really figure out how am I going to make these big data solutions act and behave like a proper tenant inside of the data center.
Excellent. Well, as really HP's foremost expert in big data, you're certainly going to have your hands full in the next several years.
Well, that's what we're all. It's really an exciting time. I mean, as we know, this industry changes all the time, and some of this big data has been going on forever. I mean, if you think about it, some of the geneticists from 300 years ago, or people that were investigating the connections between people dying in the bubonic plague, that's all big data. It's just from a different time set. It's getting a lot of visibility now because, like I said, the ability to do analytics and some of the potential for the use of this data is huge now. So yeah, it's gonna be busy for the foreseeable future.
Well, Donald Livingood, distinguished technologist from HP, thank you very much for being my guest here today.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
And I'm Bill Liberis, the Content Director of the Enterprise CIO Forum, saying thank you for joining the two of us today as well.